Trier's film are not much about plot. There is, so how do you start? Where does a movie like this begins?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, actually, it starts here. This is the writing room. This is where we sit while we work, and we've written 5 films together now. And it's usually the same: is that we meet and we start talking about small ideas about what we're living through, what we're thinking about, and then slowly we start to figure out, oh, this might be a film. And I know a lot of writers, they're really focused and they start with a pitch and then a synopsis and then a treatment and then a draft. And we just like being, I mean, we're best friends. We like being in a room together. We like talking. We like to procrastinate. And the plot is not for us the most important thing. I mean, it's very important that because it structures the whole film. But we want to explore character, to explore themes, to explore like atmosphere, and so we get to the plot quite late, and usually we talk about it like what is it that we remember of our favorite films? Is it and usually it's a character. It's some scenes, some great scenes that you just love, or just a vibe, or and it's very rarely, if you talk to people, they say, oh, I love the plot of that movie. It's not, I think we focus a little bit too much on it, and what we wanted is like to something that feels free, and the plot is in the background. It's there. We work a lot to make it work, but it's not what we consider the most important thing. And that's why some people maybe disconnect with movies, and some people might enjoy that, hopefully.
Since the film is divided in chapters, it brings to mind a literary. It's beautifully visual, but it brings to mind a literary quality to it. I was wondering if there were any novels, and which one were the novels and the films that you discussed as you were brainstorming for this. And is it true that you might take up to a year to create a script and for a script to come to fruition?
Oh yeah, easily a year. It's we're slow, and usually we sit together in this room for like 8 months of that time, and then I start writing like the scenes. But we worked out almost everything together before then. So the actually writing of scenes is a much shorter process, but we need that time to imagine it, to let our imaginations run wild and just explore it. And I guess we've always admired that freedom you can find in literature. In novels, you feel like they can go wherever they want, and films sometimes they're so formatted. You're like, oh, you're doing that, it has to have like a 3-act structure, it has to have this. If it's that kind of movie, you need this thing to happen on page 25. And there's so many rules in cinema that you can be very constricted by. And we always feel that the novel, when you read novels, we discuss novels all the time. It's not like there's a specific inspiration for this movie, but we love just how they can do what they want, and that's what we aspire to, at least give that impression to people, that these filmmakers, this director, he is doing exactly what he feels like, and that means it's personal. That's important to us, and novels are personal, and we want that kind of personal feeling in our movies. And but actually, what we did watch a lot while we were writing were like romantic comedies, the old ones, and especially George Cukor ones, that we really love, and because he's much kinder to his characters and much more understanding of psychology than a lot of other like screwball directors from the same period, and those movies are great as well. But everything, Notting Hill, big reference, you just love that. And Joachim's such a fan of Julia Roberts that he kept talking about that Eat, Pray, Love movie, that she did. So we just we're movie buffs. We love talking about films.
Yeah, Holiday came to mind
Holiday,
on this
definitely. Great,
Kubrick's
yeah.
Holiday, because of the way that Katharine Hepburn's character is set up. Just
That's a beautiful movie. I love that one.
yeah, and Renate was already had a small part in Oslo, August 31st, and Joachim wanted to work with her. Was the part written for her specifically with her in mind? And when did you start talking to her about the character?
That was one of the things that Joachim came into this room thinking about, was like, should we write something for Renate, because she is such a great actress. She has such an amazing, I mean, hopefully you guys have seen that now in the film, but she hadn't had a chance to show that in films in Norway. And Joachim just let's write something for her. That's something that we discussed a lot early. But I think we had almost finished writing the first draft, and we wrote specifically for her to play it before Joachim talked to her about it. And she was about to quit acting. She had like, I'm gonna start carpentry or something. She was just so frustrated with castings and television roles that didn't offer her any chance to really explore her craft. So I think we just caught her at the right moment.
This is the third film of what has been called the Oslo trilogy, the first being Reprise and then Oslo, August 31. How would you contextualize the three films, and also the evolution from the tone of the others to this one?
Well, it wasn't a planned trilogy. We just knew that when we started to write this movie, Worst Person in the World, we wanted to go back to the source in a way. We want to go back to the freedom we felt when we wrote our first feature, Reprise, which is also has voiceover, changed tone between comedy and quite serious drama. I mean, it just that we wanted to explore that again and go back to that that energy. And while writing, we felt, oh, we're kind of revisiting these themes now, and also because Reprise has that energy that you can recognize a lot in Worst Person, for those who can't see it, but it's haven't seen it, but it's also very much a movie about young men. There's no female perspective almost in that movie. And then we did Oslo, August 31st, which was a much more serious film than Reprise. A few laughs in Oslo, it was about 24 hours in Oslo with a man thinking about killing himself. That's the pitch that sells tickets, right? And then we came to this one, and the common thread between the movies is Oslo, of course, but also the wonderful actor who is also a full-time doctor in real life, Anders Danielsen Lee, who plays Axel in The Worst Person in the World. And he plays one of the main characters in Reprise, the main character in Oslo, and this very important secondary or maybe even main character in Worst Person in the World. And when we were writing it, we just felt we wrote for Renate, but it was while we were finishing the first draft, we were saying, oh, this has to be Anders. He has to play this. We didn't know that while writing. It just came to us at the same time. And then when Joachim sent it to him and said, would you consider like taking time off from your doctor job and doing another film with us? And he was the one who said, this feels like a trilogy. And that was a wonderful thing. And of course, it turned out to be like a great marketing strategy for us to get our old movies back in circulation. So thanks to Anders. But it wasn't a planned thing, but it just made sense when he said it, because there's so many themes that are in common with those two movies. And of course, Anders' different characters in all of them.
If you have any question, you raise your hand. Oh, there's one right there.
Yeah, I'm curious, as an expression in English, which is you fall in love and it's like the world stops. Was that the impetus for that wonderful magical sequence where the world in fact stops?
Did you get the question? So he's asking, he says that, you know, there is this an expression in English, when you fall in love, the word stops. And is that line an inspiration for the sequence where everything stops and you know, and she runs through the city?
That's not the inspiration, but that's a great way of explaining it. I mean, I've been explaining this sequence with a lot of words. And I think, yeah, if I just had that expression, I would have saved a lot of time, because that's a wonderful expression. I think the idea came, something that Joachim had brought into another script that we were developing at that point, and it didn't fit. And then it was like the idea was that you're in a relationship, that relationship is great. And then you meet someone else and you just feel, oh, I need to explore that. And you have that, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could just pause that relationship, the good relationship you're in, and then to go on like this, explore the other one, and then go back and unpause it. And then we had a lot of ideas of how that would, because you have changed during that digression with the other person. So you become someone else with that one, and that creates problem in that one. And you know, we had a lot of like comedy ideas about that. But then when we wrote towards person, we felt like, oh, this is so perfect for that moment, that she would just feel that need to, I mean, she still loves Axel in a way, but she must explore that new thing. And we also had watched some musicals. We wanted to have like some sort of larger than life scenes in this movie. And we felt, oh, this is kind of a musical scene. Let's try to make that work. There's no dancing or singing, but it's almost, I mean, you can almost feel people breaking into song here.
Well, to follow up to what you're saying, this particular scene and the magic, you know, the magic mushroom are sort of like dance. They're both in a sense dance numbers, and you know, in different ways. And when did you how did you insert them in the script? Because they don't detract from the empathy that we have for the character. In fact, they make them feel even closer, although the sequences are stylized.
Well, it's Joachim and I, we always, I mean, people always talk about form and content, like if you have one, you can't have the other almost, or if you're being very stylized, you're being superficial. And we don't feel that those are contradictions. I feel that if you engage with the form and use cinema to in an interesting way, you can also get deeper into the characters. And I think we talked about plot earlier, but one thing that we are working and interested in is also quite passive characters. I mean, you guys in the US, you have such a amazing tradition of action is character, and those heroic, often men who always know what's right, and they always they're very decisive all the time. And we're drawn to characters like Giulia, but also the other characters in our movies. They're very indecisive sometimes. You know, they don't know what they're going to do. And I often feel that it's not true that action is character. I mean, sometimes inaction is character, and sometimes knowing why someone doesn't act is interesting, but that means you have to get into their heads. And Joachim and I feel that these kind of cinematic moments of time still, or even the magic mushroom trip, it allows you to get into her head and understand her better. You know, actually it was a moment when she stood there and it's like, should I just, you know, I should break up with Axel and go to this new guy, or what, you know, that's what's happening in her head. And we make this sequence out of it, and then maybe you understand her in another way. And you're allowed a glimpse of what happens in the interior life of a character.
There's a question right there. Yeah.
The scenes with Axel when he is dying are so moving, and the things that he's saying are so deep. Was there something that has happened in your life or Joachim's life that you drew on for those scenes, because they're amazing?
Did you hear the question? Is that the scenes where he dies, they're so amazing? Was it something that they came from something out of your life or Joachim's life?
It's thank you. Those scenes were some of the most important to me, and I think also to Joachim, like in the when we were writing. Yes and no. I mean, of course, they're not straight out of our lives, but we both felt that we both had this. We both experienced loss with friends a bit early and all that. I mean, we know that. I think that's also what happens when you're getting on in your 40s. You experience loss. I mean, it's hard to avoid it. People die, and you know that suddenly that life isn't endless. And I think that's an interesting thing about being in your 40s as a writer. Because you still, at least I and Joachim as well, we still feel we know what's going on with the young people, but we can also extrapolate into even old age and the end of life, you know. And I feel it's a very rich period as a writer to explore different mindsets and characters. And what was, of course, very personal to us in those scenes was that Axel is about our age. So of course, when he describes growing up with those physical objects of DVDs and comic books and record albums and moving around the city, navigating from a record store to a video rental store to those kind of stuff, and your communication with your friends is like giving them physical objects. And that's a huge part of my life. It's a huge part of Joachim's life, and writing those words and feeling like this can be part of this movie was very moving to us and very important to us.
I think there was a question here.
I just want to say that this is such a beautiful film, and you know, there's so much internal conflict and change within a scene, and just as a writer, that's never something easy to do. My question is, what was the hardest for you personally, and for Joachim, the hardest scene for you to capture what you were trying to say? And also, at what point did the idea of chapters and voiceover come into some of your working process?
So did you get the question?
No, I didn't. I got the compliments in the beginning.
Yeah, the compliments were very warm,
I didn't get the questions.
and it was so many things about, you know, that are difficult to combine. There's so many tones of the film are difficult to combine. And the second part of the question was, how did you arrive at the chapter structure, and how the what was for you and Joachim the most difficult scene to conceive?
Well, first of all, thanks for the compliments. And the chapter structure, to begin with that question, it came. We were struggling because of what Giulia said earlier about us not being that plot oriented. We need to structure the movie, and the movie has a plot, but the plot is actually that in the beginning you feel that Giulia is just living her life, you know, and it's like moments that are not that important in a way. So they have to be interesting just by being good scenes or interesting character moments, but they don't have that cause effect structure of plot. And actually it's when it's quite late in the movie when we learn that her ex Axel is dying. Suddenly we and hopefully we as an audience and also her get to sense that, oh, these moments that seemed so inconsequential, that wasn't that important to her on the way to something, actually were hugely important parts of her life. And she has to confront that and confront the fact that she won't be able to just change and go from one thing to another her whole life. She has to know that these moments are important, but in the beginning they're just inconsequential. And when we thought of chapters, it gave us such liberty to like say, oh, this is just a scene from a life, you know, this is just that's one chapter, and then we can start again with another chapter in her life, another scene or another sequence, or even like another character. I mean, we could never have gone on a whole flashback trip with her new boyfriend Ivan and his ex if we hadn't that chapter structure. It wouldn't be accepted in a way, as an audience wouldn't know why are we going here. But if you have like a card saying chapter, people are okay, a new start, you know, I'm ready for anything. And that was a wonderful thing.
He was also asking about the voiceover, which I forgot to mention. So I think the voiceover you use is that the same structuring purpose?
It's a little bit less of a structuring thing, but very much a freedom thing. You know, it's we kind of want, when we do voiceover, we don't want to do like use it as an easy option, you know, like, well, we can't tell it with the images, so with the voiceover will say it. We have a lot of fun with how the voiceover contrasts or illustrates, or for instance, that whole, one of the important scenes to us was the breakup scene with Axel, where we thought, oh, we've never seen, I mean, everyone's been through breakthroughs and breakups, and they are usually much more complicated than you see in movies, because in the movie it's one person made up her mind, or his mind, and say it, and then you have like an initial reaction or not, and then it's finished, because that's what you need to tell a story. And we said, oh no, let it continue. Let us be in that feeling of the conflicting feelings of being attracted to each other, pushing away, having sex, regretting what you said, saying something in the heat of the moment, all that kind of thing, and just let it live. And then the voiceover also gave us like a method of being there, but also having that meta kind of distance that you also can have in those situations, that you suddenly you see yourself from the outside, or I mean, it just gave us so much more to play with, to create an interesting scene that, you know, that doesn't advance the plot that much, but it gives you that, yeah, it gives us the tools to really delve into it, have fun with it, and hopefully communicate emotions and energy with it. So that's the important thing with the voiceover, I think, more than structuring or telling the story. The voiceover disappears slowly, but after that scene, it's barely there in the movie, you know. So it's not important in that way, as the chapters are very important for the structure. But it was something that we wanted to do with this movie because we know we have fun with it. That was going back to the source thing, back to the Reprise, the first movie we made thing, was because we made movies where we said, okay, stop with the voiceover. We love it too much. Let's make it hard for ourselves. And now we went back to it with joy.
So last, the hardest scene. That's part of it.
Hardest scene. I mean, to be honest, to be really honest, we had, you know, the moment where Axel, in very early in the movie, he tries to break up with her in bed, saying that I think with different places in our lives, I already feel like I'm starting to fall in love with you. So I think I need to stop it there, because I know this will end up with you needing your space and freedom, and you'll completely hurt my feelings. So he's foreshadowing everything that's going to happen in that relationship, you know, and she falls in love with him because of that speech, because he really can see her. He explains her in a way that she like, oh, he understands something in me, he has seen something in me, and I think I think also it's the first time anyone's broken up with her. So so I think that triggers something in her as well. That scene was actually in the start of the movie, and a bit longer, and we couldn't really get it to have that kind of it had so many layers, you know. So we put it a little bit later, and so it took a little pressure of it. But that was actually the hardest scene to write and get right.
There's one right there. Yeah.
Can you explain if there is a connectedness? I saw it as a woman, the role of blood in the film, from Julie's friend hitting her head, the mushroom scene with blood to losing her baby with the blood. I saw connectedness. Maybe there is, and I'd love for you to comment on that.
So she's asking if there are 3 scenes where blood appears, and as a woman, she feels, especially as a woman, she feels like a connection through the different scenes. And she was wondering if that's what was intentional.
Well, we didn't think about the connection between the 3 scenes. I'm sorry to say, but we thought about the blood a lot, of course, and the menstrual blood that she uses in that magic mushroom scene, and the scene afterwards with his boyfriend. And we really like, is this okay for us? I mean, like 2 men going into that. So we talked to Renata, of course, about that, and she found it hilarious. And most women who read it really liked that mushroom scene and thought that was so liberating. So we were like, oh, okay, great, glad we took a risk on that one. Yeah.
I like to talk a little bit about Renate, because her performance and is so extraordinary, so luminous, you know, and that it goes from really quiet moments to moments of physical, you know, expansiveness. And can you describe a little bit how she made the character for herself, how she, you know, became the character, and what it was like on set?
Well, that's where Joachim shouldn't have been sick, and he would explain all this much better than I. What I mean, the start of what we're talking about is that, I mean, you know, the line she had in Oslo on 31st, the one line was like, let's go to a party, you know. So we felt that we hadn't really written something that she could use, and what Joachim did was that we tried to give her a lot of material, and Joachim rehearsed a lot with the actors beforehand and lets them try stuff, improvise. And I watch those tapes, and sometimes I rewrite a little to fit Renata or Anders, but try to fit better the way she likes to do it, and her energy and everything. And what Joachim does on set is that he gives the actors so much love and feeling of freedom, so they can really do whatever they want, and he will just love them for it, and he will guide them so well. And I think she just blossomed with that kind of direction. And what she does so well is that she can make any moment spontaneous. So it's like she can say a line, and on set everyone's like, oh, that's great improvisation. And even I go, oh, what's really in the script? And oh, she said the line. It just felt like it came into her head at that moment, with the emotion, and even that she felt surprised by it. You know, she brings so much life into it. She's so committed to the every moment, which I think that's why she's so fascinating to watch, is that she just she's there 100% every moment in every take.
Yeah, there are scenes where she doesn't even speak. There are things, and she's alone. And one of the most moving ones for me is when she walks out of the book party at the beginning, and she has that lonely walk, and there is so much in that walk, and she sits down, and there is a close-up, and tears come to her eyes. I mean, how much was that written, and how much is just something that happened during the filming, that she found that emotion?
Well, actually, that moment was written, but it was written like, I can't remember the phrase exactly. It was like a sudden feeling of, like, melancholic feeling overwhelms her, something like that, you know. And how do you act that? You know, you need to break that down into specific beats and moments, and she does that perfectly. But there are other moments where she feels like a moment that I would think wasn't that important, and she would fill it with almost the same kind of emotion, or I mean, she can act even like she blushes. You can see it in the scenes, and that's a very hard thing to act, you know, to make. So you have to be in that emotion. And for instance, that scene that's one of my favorites in the movie is when she meets her new love, you know, Ivan, at the party, and they are like moving around each other, not wanting to be unfaithful, but both really wanting to. The way you can see in her face all those emotions, and the way she, I mean, that's not in the words, that's in her face.
Okay, we have one more, and then we'll,
Well, I had two.
okay.
First off, the compliment, it absolutely was terrific. Following up on the character question, do you have other things that you plan for this character in the future? Is there any sort of follow-up, number one? And the second question is, the expressiveness you were just talking about, to some extent, is a little bit difficult when you're reading subtitles. Had you thought about overdubbing this?
So question number one is, do you have other plans for this character? And question number two is that because the subtitles might distract a little bit from the emotion, have you ever thought of dubbing the film, presenting the film in a version dubbed in English?
Well, the first question first. Joachim said to me just the other day is that because, you know, every time a movie is a little bit successful, some people want to buy remake rights. And Joachim said, we should never sell the right to make a Scandinavian, like Norwegian language follow-up, because we might need to revisit Giulia in the future. He said that just maybe yesterday. So maybe we're not finished with Giulia, but we don't have any like plans at the moment, but it's definitely not off the table from what Joachim just told me. The other question is that, I mean, I grew up in Norway, and we are like 5 million people. So there's not like a big enough market to dub movies. So I grew up with subtitles. And my feeling is that when I see dubbed films, you lose so much of the acting that way as well. There's so much, even if you don't understand the words, there's so much emotion in the words and the phrasing and everything. So I personally, I have the same problem as you when I watch movies in Japanese or Korean or whatever, but I prefer hearing the original actor's voice and try to learn to read really quickly, you know, so I don't miss that moment in their eyes.
And okay, one more.
You talked about how you changed the beginning of the film from the script. I'm curious if why did you start with the shot of her at the party with her back turned and then circle back to that later? What was the choice behind that?
What was the choice behind starting the film with her at the party, you know, looking at her back and then circling back on that scene later?
Well, it was that circle was always a part of the structure in a way, in different ways. But the idea, very simply put, is that, I mean, the movie is called The Worst Person in the World, and it was interesting to begin the movie with a contrast to that you see a woman that seems like a sympathetic, thoughtful, even a little bit vulnerable person in an elegant setting, and then suddenly you see the worst person in the world, which is like, what? But she can't be, you know. You get the feeling from the start that this is not a literal title. You know, it's more like in Norway we have that expression. I don't know if you use it in the same way, that you sometimes, you just, when you've done something you regret or you just feel lousy about something, you say, oh, I feel like the worst person in the world. And people say that a lot in Norway. So we have that already built in. But I know that some countries don't. So some people see it more literal. But that beginning for me always like sets the tone a bit about how to read that title.
Well, we want to thank Eskil Vogt for his time and the insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.